Welcome to Newark Air Museum. Quite an interesting day really in many respects, because 51 years ago, actually in date terms the 14th of April, we actually had our official opening to the public, and last year we celebrated our 50th. It was actually on the Saturday, but obviously as the dates have moved, so that actual date is tomorrow. So 51 years have been open to the public. I'll put an apology up straight away to the other presentation people. Apologies for the light levels. We've done the best we can. We've got some extra sheets in. I never thought we'd be saying that, but we wish we'd have a cloud come over and take some of the sunshine away with the summer that we've had, or the start of the spring. But say welcome to Newark Air Museum. I'm not going to go on too much more. We do have a museum history presentation that I'm going to be giving shortly, but I'll hand over to Alan.
Thank you very much, Howard, and thank you so much for hosting us today, you and your team. Right, we'll get on with the formal part of this, the 222nd, I think, meeting of Aviation Heritage UK. Can I just remind people, I'm sure you were told when you were signing in, please return your badges to us when you before you leave. I'm under a lot of pressure. The sword of Ed Sharman is hanging over my head if we do not return them, because they do belong to the RAF Museum. So if we can do that, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, the formal part of the meeting we're not going to make too long-winded and too serious, but there are some things I just want to cover off before my colleagues go through various bits of business. The first thing is the secretaryship of AHUK. As you know, we have struggled to find somebody to fill at least one of the shoes of Brian Dixon since he retired. Barry Love had a go at it and found that it was just too difficult for his current circumstances. But I'm very pleased to say that Anne Watson, who worked for first Julian and then for me at Brooklands Museum, has agreed to start picking up some of the secretarial responsibilities for AHUK. She's unfortunately not able to be here today. She's sat in on the last two exec committee meetings, and despite the experience of sitting in on two exec committee meetings, has agreed to help us. So she's taken it on a provisional basis just to make sure. She recently retired from the museum, and but she's working on stuff at the moment. She's even answering, or will be from this week, answering your emails that come through to secretary at aviationheritageuk.org. So if you see a different name on the bottom of the of an email, that's Anne, and she's very sportingly agreed to help. So this is a great step forward for us. She's not going to work 40 hours a week being secretary like Brian seemed to, but she will answer emails and make sure that everything gets moved to the right place, and we'll be looking after various other things, including taking minutes of meetings. She's not able to be here today, so Paul is taking minutes for us. That's a really big step forward for us to have somebody back in the chair as secretary. A couple of quick updates on other things. People keep asking me what happened to the Airbus funding. The Airbus funding is almost there. We have the final version of the contract being reviewed this week, so hopefully we'll be able to announce the way forward on that, with actual money flowing to museums in the very near future, probably next month. Also, you probably will have heard me talking at the January meeting, and maybe probably a couple of meetings before that, talking about the possibility of converting AHUK from a company limited by guarantee into a charity. Our men and arts referred to us throughout as a charity. The Mem and Arts as adopted when we became a company effectively are those of a charity. I've been working with some very helpful legal advice from a major London legal practice, which has very sportingly not been charging me for it, and they have been advising us on the few changes that we would need to make to the Mem and Arts to make us fully eligible as a charity. We now have the changes to our charitable objects and one or two other things being circulated amongst the exec, and subject to everybody being happy, we will probably call an EGM to coincide with the AGM, which will be at Hendon on the 6th of July. And at that meeting, I hope that we will be in a position where we can have the articles of association changed officially, so that we can then apply to the Charity Commission to be registered as a charity. We have to have everything in place before we can ask, apply to the Charity Commission to be recognised as a charity. So as I say, if everything goes according to plan, when we have the AGM at Hendon, we'll have an EGM first to adopt the new, the revised articles, and then carry on with the normal AGM. So that's a really important step forward for us if we can make that happen. Being a registered charity would help us in a variety of ways. So I'm hoping that we can make progress on that. We will keep you informed. And again, just make sure, because we're doing things like this, if any of you are having your own AGMs and changing the responsibilities within your organisations, please make sure that we know who the current contacts are, because it's really important that we're not missing anybody out when we're looking at major changes like that. The other thing, just to talk about, as I say, the AGM will be at Hendon, 6th of July. I think we will make sure that we get notification up in tons of time, and I think Ed will be giving us recommendations of the nearest boarding houses, messes, whatever, where people can stay, because obviously we don't want to be paying £1,000 a night downtown in London for that meeting. So that's the 6th of July. And then we do have our last live meeting of the year is currently scheduled to be at Rolls-Royce Derby. Changes, as you're probably aware, are happening within Rolls-Royce. They're laying off large numbers of back office and other people under a plan that was announced back in December. That is working its way through. At the moment, the heritage operation at Rolls-Royce, we're not quite sure how that's going to end up. Neil Chattel, who's been running the heritage operation at Rolls and has been a fantastic supporter of AHUK, unfortunately took his early retirement yesterday, and so our key anchor at RRH is no longer there. So we're waiting for things to settle down over the next few weeks. We may have to change the venue for the October meeting, but we'll keep you informed. At the moment we're working on the assumption that we will be at Derby in October, but we'll let you know if there's any changes to that. Other things before I get on to my specialist colleagues, just some of the work that wearing my AHUK chair hat. I also sit on the all-party parliamentary group on aviation. I chair the heritage working group there. We're currently working on a couple of major airfield planning issues. One of the airfields being hugely historic, by Tollerton at Northampton. Yeah, Nottingham, yes. Northampton, yeah. Anyway, Tollerton, great historic airfield. And although Tollerton has been on the local council's development plan for many years. We have found enough holes in the process by which it was included as a potential development site that we are working with the General Aviation Awareness Council and others on challenging the whole process under which Tollerton has been identified as a residential development site. We're trying to get some work in on that. There is a very big document about to be lodged with the council, and it appears we've now, over the last few days, managed to get some very interesting and fairly robust support from Historic England, because that is an historic site with 17 listed toolboxes on it and various other things. And so we don't know how far we'll get, but we're certainly challenging as hard as we can to keep what is a really important historic airfield, the second municipal airport licensed in this country, active since 1926, I think. Julian may tell us more later. Anyway, so we're working on that, and also on the challenge to a slightly less historic one, but the home to many historic aeroplanes, which is Popham, which again is there's a really ill-informed development project being touted for Popham. When I say it's odd, the whole of the public consultation document on the proposed development of Popham Airfield, and nowhere mentions the fact that the site is actually an airfield. That's the sort of battle that we are trying to fight on behalf of aviation and heritage aviation everywhere we can. Right, so, and the other thing I think I mentioned at the last meeting, but we did manage to get a result again on heritage aviation through the APPG. We managed to get the CAA to stop banning people from flying aeroplanes with elderly ejection seats, just because there aren't any spare cartridges lying around at the moment, and it's now got to the stage the CAA has allowed a further exemption for people flying out 7 seats, and a manufacturer has been identified to make the replacement cartridges so they can be brought right back up to spec, which is another great thing for keeping some historic aeroplanes flying, which is a nice sort of thing for us to do. Right, that's the major things that I wanted to talk about today, and I think it'd be quite good if we now hand over, if he's in the room. Where's he gone? David Bradley.
Let to know where we are with money on this organisation and what we're doing with some of it. Just as a starting point here, we have 2 bank accounts in the organisation. One is really for day-to-day expenses and things, and the other one is for larger sums of money, such as loans that we have made to various museums. So currently we have about £4,600 in our day-to-day account, and in our other account, which is also collecting extra money from the bank, is we've got nearly £22,000 in that bank. What we can do, we had a debate in our most recent meeting, we have been operating loans out to organisations which we charge no interest on them, so all we've got to do is pay back what you borrow from us. The previous loan system here was for about £3,000 maximum, or any sum up to that, and the requirement was for repayment of it in about 3 years' time. What we've decided to do now is to raise that level to £4,500, and that is available. All we've got to do is make a case for some loan that you want to make. We have 2 organisations at the moment who are on loan, the Aircraft Restoration Organisation and the Houghton Park set-up. The Aircraft Restoration one will be finishing later this year, so they will have recovered. We will have recovered all the money we lent to them, which has been used in various tasks. Same with Houghton Park. because they've had a lot of work to do, not only with the aircraft, but with the buildings they're in as well. And their £3,000 we lent them will be fully returned to us early next year. So anyway, so now at the moment we can raise potential loans for up to £4,500, and as I said, they're interest free. So it's probably, if you do need some money for some projects, this is probably the cheapest way you'll ever get it. If you go to a bank anyway, you're going to pick up goodness knows what in interest charges. So it's up to you, and leave that with you. That's all I've really got to say here. But it's the money is there available if you want something to do with some major specific task. All we need is a proper definition of it and some costing to go with it, and to go through the process. Okay. Yeah.
Have you any questions for the Treasurer?
Is that payment back over 4 years or 3 years or what?
It's 3 years.
It's still 3 years.
Yeah, and on a regular monthly. It's not a lump sum at the end. It's normally we ask on the smaller loans it's been £100 a month. With a £4,500 loan, it would be a bit more, but yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, we have in the past, we've had loans to others which have been completed now, so that has happened in the past. We've had loans to several other organisations and they've all been completed, so it's not that uncommon.
Right, now I'd like to hand over to Paul, our membership secretary. Shall I carry on taking the notes for you while you talk about membership?
It's okay, I'll record it. I won't remember. But I might remember, yeah. So currently we've got 70 members paid, about 5 or 6 that are in the sort of corporate purchase order billing cycle process, which is interesting. There's a few that I'm chasing. It has come to light that there's been some problems with the emails not going out. Other people didn't get the email at all. They got an email that didn't have anything attached to it, which is a bit unfortunate. We've got a couple of new members joining. Fast at Farnborough, Kenley Revival, and the volunteer engineering organisation at Manchester Aeropark. We have one so far resigned, unfortunately, which is the Yorkshire Helicopter Preservation Group, which have decided not to be a separate member. They prefer to sort of link in with the museum itself and still be in contact via that way. So we're trying, like Alan said, we're trying to create more contact information for different people in your organisation. So obviously a lot of you are one-man bands or just small groups, but some organisations have obviously treasurers and chairmen and so forth, so we're starting to ask those contact details to be added as well. So any questions? No?
Right, yeah, just on those membership things, you will notice that well, some of you might not have realised Paul is now using a formal membership at aviationheritageuk.org email address, so just check that you haven't been letting emails from him, because he's sending out mass emails. There is a danger that some of them may have gone into your junk or bulk folder or whatever, so make sure that he is down as an approved addressee in your email system, and if you make sure that it's accepted. And thank you to those organisations who have paid up on time. We are trying to get it to the stage where people pay in the first quarter of the year, not in the last quarter of the year. And there is a gentle note that if people don't actually renew their subscriptions, we don't want to spend all our time at exec meetings talking about who hasn't paid. And the constitution of the organisation does say that if you don't pay up within the first 6 months of the year, then your membership is suspended, and I do not want to suspend any organisation from membership. Right, can we go on? Julian, would you care to come and we'd like to borrow the table again so you can...
Do you want to just introduce Andy Lambert?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes, something I forgot to do right at the beginning of this meeting was at the back of the room is Andy Lambert, armed with a camera, and Christine, his manager. Andy has been filming everything aviation and otherwise that goes on at Brooklands for about the last 40 years, and came and filmed the awards ceremony at last year, and so he's agreed to film our presentations here as well. So I should have asked you right at the very beginning, does anybody object to having the back of their heads recorded on film here today?
To some people, that's the best view.
But anyway, Andy, it's very, very much appreciated. There is quite a lot of, I've had quite a lot of emails in the last 10 days saying, are we going to stream this meeting live, which we couldn't have done because there isn't a Wi-Fi connection here to do it, but we may be able to make the presentations available on the website in due course so that people can pick up on them. And Andy, thank you very much for coming and doing that for us.
Yes, alphabetical order really, not order of importance, but Bicester, some of you may know, Bicester Heritage own the site and have done a marvellous job in preserving a large part of the remains of a pre-war bomber base. But unfortunately, all resident aircraft owners were recently told to vacate the nationally listed Southern 1926 A-type hangar in a few months' time, because that needs major restoration work, which they've obviously got funding for. And due to the considerable costs involved and the owners being a commercial business, I think it's unlikely the hangar will house aircraft again after work is finished. So again, there's some more light aircraft, historic aircraft potentially looking for new homes. Maybe they'll get some temporary hangars in the long run, I don't know. So that's one to watch. Blackbush, there was an application made by Blackbush Airport on the 2nd of January to the Government Planning Inspectorate to deregister, it's quite unusual this, deregister 35 acres of common land and replace it in an equivalent area just outside the airport. And there was a February deadline for comments. Unfortunately, we were too busy with other things, and we did promise the Blackbush Heritage Trust, who asked us to support this application, but unfortunately we didn't have time in the time available. But let's watch the space on that one, because potentially the Blackbush Heritage Trust can get a new base and ultimately a hangar for the Viking there, hopefully. Fox Warren is a site most of you never heard of probably. It's in Red Hill Road, Cobham, just a stone's throw from Brooklands. Some news appeared online just last weekend. 2 acres of Surrey woodland include an underground bunker with possible links to Barnes Wallis and the Dam Busters, up for sale by public auction on the 18th of April, next week. The guide price £165,000, despite the land being in Greenbelt and no current planning permission. But this is in fact one of 3 secret dispersed sites in that area, in that road, built for Vickers Armstrongs, just after the air raid was took place on Brooklands on the factory, 4th of September 1940. Nearly 90 people, mostly Vickers workers, died, and they moved the experimental department down to this location. And that's where the hangar was built that housed the prototype that became known as the Tin Mosquito, the Vickers one that didn't get into production. But the hangar was soon cleared after the war, but a significantly sized air raid shelter survives. And a potential purchaser recently asked us at BA Systems Heritage for historical information and any records about it, and he's keen to record and assess the location if he wins the bidding process. So we'll watch this space. It might be, if he doesn't win it, then someone else might be wanting to, I don't know, demolish it. We might have to try and intervene and see if we can get it listed or something. Kenley, we've got new members from the Kenley Revival Project team who should be at our meeting at Hendon, hopefully giving a presentation about what they do. But they had disappointing news recently. Their request last year for designation assessment for the Kenley's rare World War I squash court to be nationally designated, that was unsuccessful. Despite earlier rumours to the contrary, on the 7th of March, Historic England announced they would not recommend this building for listing, nor the nearby Portcullis Club, which is home to the local branch of the RAF Association, and the World War II air raid shelter associated with that. But they have designated the rare spigot mortar pit, airfield defence thing, right next to the squash courts as a scheduled monument. So there's some good news out of this. We don't know the reasons for these decisions, it seems a little bit odd, but the Kenley folk believe that their application was worthwhile, particularly because the new owners of the nearby derelict listed Oxford Mess are now showing interest in restoring the squash courts too, so that's promising. Old Sarum, some of you may have seen stuff in the press back in the beginning of the year. I mentioned at the members' Zoom meeting as well, but on the 29th of January the Salisbury Journal reported that on the 4th of January the airfield owners of Old Sarum had submitted a new planning application to Wiltshire County Council to repair and refurbish that World War I Grade 2 listed Hangar 3, severely damaged by storms in 22, but again that was damaged further by storms on the 21st of January after this planning application. They costed it £3 million before this latest damage, and Old Sarum, you'd hardly say, is one of the UK's most important surviving World War I airfields. This building has been neglected for far too long and is being tied up in a controversial larger scheme to redevelop the airfield. So there was a deadline for comments on the hangar plans on the 22nd of February, but certainly as far as we could see, permission seemed likely to be refused, with costings increased due to that recent storm damage. So we decided not to submit comments but just to monitor it. Surprisingly then, on the 13th of March, the local paper reported the council had approved the application just a couple of days earlier. So let's see if their work actually starts. That would certainly appease lots of local people and us as well. Popham, Alan has mentioned, is obviously a big threat to future Popham for housing. We submitted objections on behalf of AHUK to Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council in time for their deadline on the 4th of March. We hear that many other people objected too. So let's hope that has some effect. It's not cut and dried yet there, but also thanks to Alan's involvement with the APPG, also suggested that they form a supporters organisation. So there's a new group called Popham Airfield Matters, and the more members they can get for that, the better. It will help strengthen the case for opposing the closure of a very busy and active and much loved airfield, which is a community asset as well. All kinds of other non-aviation things happen there. I believe membership is open for a lifetime fee of just £1, and the constitution is in preparation. So if any of you love Popham, like some of us have been to it for a number of years, then you should consider joining that. RAF Halton, that's another one. I know our friends from RAF Heritage have been involved in that, but the main camp is now due for disposal by MOD and redevelopment as housing. And there was an important planning document up for public consultation, again with the deadline of the 4th of March, so we've been busy. Alan has submitted some comments on that on behalf of you to Buckinghamshire Council. So we're not against it, but there's quite a lot of, there's well over 20 listed buildings there. There's not the airfield included in this scheme, so just the main camp separate from the airfield, and yeah, obviously the Trenchard Museum, who I think someone from Trenchard was due here today, but I don't know if they've appeared, but they're obviously going to be affected by this scheme potentially. Stowe Marys, those who were in our members' Zoom meeting in January, he reported that there's still various surviving unrestored nationally listed World War I buildings at Stowe Marys, which are now on Historic England's latest Heritage at Risk register, and he still needs more funding to resolve this issue. But that's an ongoing battle he's got, obviously, but we wish him luck with that. Nearly there, but Tollerton, Alan's mentioned, Nottingham Airport, its other name. Again, another active general aviation airfield seems set to be forced to close to make way for a major new housing scheme, already prepared in comprehensive detail by the developer, who are called Vistry Homes, a consortium of Bovis and Countryside Homes. They've been working on this for a long time, and huge amount of detail. I think there's about 35 detailed documents on the planning, the council's planning website. From the historical perspective, as Alan said, this was Britain's first licensed municipal airport with a permanent site, followed the Manchester Airport's temporary site at Wythenshawe in 1929, but this opened as Nottingham's Airport in June 1930. And it also has an important history of civil and military flying training, and particularly aircraft maintenance and repair. All fully detailed in an excellent 2007 book, which I was lucky enough to find on my bookshelf I bought some years ago. This is really good. I've been looking now at the heritage assessment, if you like, that the planners have put it, the developers have put into the planners. I haven't seen a mention of this book at all so far, and very little mention of aircraft repair work. I mean, there was something like nearly 2,000 bombers, Hamdens and Lancasters in particular were completely overhauled and repaired there. That could have been otherwise out of action permanently. Field Aircraft Services from Croydon set up a shop there before the war, and that might explain why there's such an unusually large number of wartime pillboxes there. 17 pillboxes on one airfield. I don't know of another site with that many. There's possibly Aberporth in Wales, or another Welsh airfield that's got a similar number, but all of these are listed grade 2, so they've got to survive, and there are no other surviving wartime buildings or structures as far as I'm aware there, unless anyone knows different, and 6 of the pillboxes are in the current proposed planning application to develop 400 houses on parts of the airfield, which involves closing it, taking up parts of the runway, leaving the rest for a little while longer, but ultimately they want to put several thousand houses on the site. Interesting, that book published in 2007 was already, the writing was on the wall, because the council had just sold the site to what looks certainly like not an airfield operating company, but a developer rubbing their hands with glee. So anyway, there's a deadline for public comments on this hybrid planning application, which is about the first 400 houses, but also the wider scheme. And we hope that Alan, with his involvement in the all-party parliamentary group, can actually pick holes in the argument that they reckon they've got everything lined up to go ahead, hopefully, as far as they're concerned. So the deadline is the 22nd of April. We will try to submit comments about that on the heritage issues in particular next week. Nearly there. Weathersfield in Essex on the 8th of August last year. Some Cold War nuclear bomb store and a Sidewinder air-to-air missile store, along with associated blast walls, were officially designated as Grade 2 nationally listed buildings, which is not something we knew about at the time until Mike Easton heard about it and tipped me off. So that's good to see things are still being officially protected. And lastly, with my Miles Aircraft interest, or my Miles Aircraft collection badge on today, I'm sorry to say the demolition equipment arrived in early March at Woodley to knock down the remains of the Miles factory. There's been a temporary sort of delay while Archaeology South East won a contract to do the official Historic England Level 2 standard of record survey before the work starts. So I made sure they got in touch with the Museum of Arch Aviation, looked at the archives there. I helped them with more information, and they've done their recording work. And I just had a phone call from Ken Fosterke this morning at the museum there saying demolition machinery has moved in numbers on the site now. So that building is going to, that site is going to go. The local newspaper didn't pick up the story until just recently when the council gave permission for demolition, so I was able to take a few more pictures just recently, but that's too late. We at least tried our best to oppose that scheme. I think that's all, unless anyone knows of any other sites. Mike Eastman's got another.
Yeah, no, just to say that I think it's during this last week that chopped in my inbox yesterday was Doncaster Finley, that the local authority has secured a 125-year lease from Peel to reopen the airfield, and they're working to appoint a new operator with the support of TUI and another airline at the moment.
Yeah, great. You did mention that to me last night, I forgot. But, and that potentially has implications, obviously, hopefully positive for the Vulcan, which is hopefully not going to have to now move from there. So it's still outside at the minute, I believe, but let's see what happens next. Well, that's a good positive story to end on. Thank you.
Picking up on the Tollerton aspect, we, through our sort of contacts and some of the work that we've done on Knots Aviation, we're certainly familiar with the development. Tollerton's been under development for quite a number of years. A lot of the early portions went several years ago with the Spire Hospital that was built there, next to some of the hangars. From the museum's point of view, and I'm certainly with John in the room, John Barclay, one of our early acquisitions, the Seafires at Canet Aviation, most of the restoration for that was actually done at Tollerton by Ormond Aviation, and a guy called Alan Purdy, and that was on site there for about 6 years. So the history is there, but some of that history went a number of years ago. But anyway, so it's sad, but we just have to try and do what we can do. Once again, welcome to Newark Air Museum. My name is again Howard Healy, I'm one of the museum trustees. The only good thing about the light levels you're going to not see the full effect of one of the most embarrassing slides of the day, but we'll come on to that in a moment. So the museum's history really goes back to 1961, and the idea of forming a museum came about from two organisations in the Newark area, the Royal Observer Corps with a post at Claypole, which is 15 Foxtrot 2, and the Newark Squadron of the Air Training Corps. And one of the founding aims was that they wanted to own a Spitfire. We briefly had the task of Spitfire on loan, but it never came to fruition in terms of owning that Spitfire, but who knows, the possibilities are still there. One of the first and the most significant, in my view, saves that the museum made was in 1963, and the members then managed to save the remains of 3 Westland Wallace biplanes that were in the woods of Crandall, and they were secured into the museum. Initially they were moved at Abbott's Boiler Works in Newark, and then eventually they made their way to Hendon. And that early effort from the museum members saved, in effect, the only Westland Wallace that survived. In the fuller presentation I do the pictures, but I've got my time limits today, so I'm going to do it just verbally. We actually had our first aircraft flown in to what is the showground, which was the Percival Provost. It was an ex-Cranwell machine, and that was flown in July 1967 with the approval of our landlord. This part of the site that we're on here, we're actually on an original wartime taxiway down to a dispersal from RAF Winthorpe. This part of the site is leased from the Agricultural Society, and we are in the sort of latter third of a 50-year lease for this site. Over where Hangar 2 is land that we own. So a bit later we'll see in 1995 we purchased that. So we've always had the long-term aim, but also trying to preserve some of that local history. Over the years, 8 of our aircraft have actually been flown in to Winthorpe, the last of which was the Desford in 2022, and that would use the runway. Yesterday it was the Antique and Collectors Fair. It's now got its name as Vulcan Way because that's where the Vulcan flew in 1983. Okay, 1968, the museum formally registered as a charity and also as a limited company, and full Sunday name is Newark, Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire Air Museum Limited, and that's what we've traded as ever since. We started formal work with this, trying to work with the showground to get a lease and establish the site, and also we were working towards a formal opening in 1973. First permanent site, just about make it out. There's a Swift and the Meteor test bed from Rolls-Royce and Hucknall on there. If only we could have the same sort of level of security fencing now that we had then. Having said that, the following year, 1971, one of the few losses that we've ever had was the Anson that was lost in May that year, just after the Newark show. Varying views on what happened, but I'm fairly convinced that it was a deliberate act, unfortunately. But from that, we recovered wing sections. So the wing sections from the original Anson are now what's on the Anson in Hangar 1. And that was another purchase out of Echo Electronics in Southend. So we recovered from that. And touch wood, find some wood, and yeah, it's one of the worst losses we've ever had. So we've not done too badly over the years. Okay, official opening in 1973, 14th of April. The embarrassing bit, I can't make it out here, but that is a young Howard Healy in complete red tank top. And I was a schoolboy in Newark and used to cycle up to the museum, and on and off I've been involved pretty much ever since in various degrees and whatever. My interest came from RF Balderton. My late father was evacuated from Sheffield and I grew up with his stories of RF Balderton, and so it was an opportunity to get to aeroplanes. What I look back on now, the two people that opened the museum, our president at the time, can't quite make him out, was this gentleman David Bonham Carter, and he was integral in establishing the Commonwealth, the Empire Training Programme in North America. former CEO at Waddington, and he introduced Chief Marshal Rafe Cochrane. So Cochrane actually performed. So OC5 Group at the time and the Dams Ray did the official cutting. I'm so embarrassed to look back, and I was thinking I could go to the thought process. I wonder why they got those two old men to open the museum, not knowing who they were, what they'd done. And having learned that, an important part of what we try to do is try and remember the people. It's the people that are important as part of this process, as much as the objects and whatever. So as I say, the official opening 51 years ago, and done quite a few developments over there. A bit of a snapshot. Left this one in March 1977. Pick it up as what a job. We managed to save the longest serving Shackleton Mark III in RAF history. It was being disposed of at Finningley prior to the Silver Jubilee Review, and we dismantled and moved the Shackleton in 6 weeks and put in something about 6,000 volunteer hours to actually do that. Lots of people said that it couldn't be done. It was one of the pair that found Chichester at the end of the Rugby World Yacht Trip, and she still sits outside today. And if anybody's been on the Shackleton today, but Brian, who's the guide today, is a former, he did his qualification, flew on 42 Squadron on our aircraft, and then latterly went on to 51 Squadron with Nimrod R1s. Good history, and again, good people stories again. It was a busy time. We tend to get in, aircraft come in numbers, small clusters. 22nd of June 77, the Hastings flew in. Berlin Airlift veteran, one of 4 that remain, and was literally landed at Winthorpe, was brief over on the other side before we had to move sites. One of my first jobs, being a youngster back then, I used to be the one that was sent up inside the aircraft to open it, and always used to come out covered in black dust. Always used to get in trouble with my late mother, and we eventually found out that we were actually still picking up the coal dust in the stringers from when it had been flying coal into Berlin during the Berlin airlift. And that's what I was getting into trouble for. So it's quite, there's personal stories in the histories and things. It's just more than aeroplanes, which is quite important. Okay, 77, 78, the landlord's showground insisted that we needed to move site. We were on the other side of the airfield. We had some initial planning problems because Newark's bypass was being put in, and part of the site where we are now had the line of the road in it, and so we weren't allowed to get planning permission other than move the aircraft over. We also had some dialogue over the military and development plan, which I'll pick up a little bit more on in the Saab scheme later, but the trustees at the time were instrumental in getting a lot of the aircraft loan system put into place and agreed, and that's benefited a lot of preservation generally. Moving on, one of the biggest aircraft and probably one of our most popular is the Vulcan. Pre-Falklands campaign, we were lined up like lots of locations to have a Vulcan. Post-Falklands, we were told we were no longer eligible for a Vulcan, and we had to then basically fight that decision to try to get that changed. We went through a whole process to do that, and something I've only just found out in the last 18 months. I don't know if anybody's been in the Vulcan today. There's a guy called John LeBrun who is sort of doing the guiding today, and John is a former Vulcan CFI. He actually did a secret inspection of the runway to see whether it was still capable of landing a Vulcan there, and only that came out. We always understood it to be done a different way, but John said, yeah, I signed that off. So you're always learning, you're always finding out new things. So the largest, heaviest aircraft ever to land at Winthorpe landed, taxied down where you've driven in today, and then across the grass to where it's displayed. Delivery day. Of all the Vulcans that went into museums, it was the only one at the time to go into a non-licensed airfield. Shortest delivery flight of any of them, 10 minutes from Waddington. We still had the ops score. I was looking yesterday with Rick, and 10 minutes, and that included one flyby as well, which was quite memorable. There's some photographs in the entrance to Hangar 1. For me, most memorable bit of that, when they came down, there's no markings to follow. The ground crew turned in too early and we missed the trackway that we got laid down. We ended up with a pile of soil about yay high, and shovels, spades appeared from, to this day I don't know where, there you go. And I was one of 4 that went underneath an idling Vulcan. No air defenders, nothing, go in, dig it out to get it moving again, whatever. Star Wars, maybe the Force be with you, it's the only way you can describe it. You know, it's just all around you and whatever, you know, but again, memorable stories and the people around it. Okay, we had a phase in the 1980s, we did a bit of almost pioneering work back in the day. You were very restricted in terms of your loads as to what widths you could transport. Encouraged a little bit by a few tips from Martsy when we moved the Gannet in, we started to go through a process of doing our own appeals in terms of moving wide aircraft. So the Sea Vixen came in from Bedford, Canberra BI-8 from Abingdon, Buccaneer S1 from Bruntingthorpe. Particular memories of that one because we persuaded the Leicestershire Police to let us move the load at 5:30 on a Sunday morning, and I've got a wonderful set of photographs following the load going around all the roundabouts the wrong way in Leicester and around traffic lights. People are actually very cooperative if you talk to them, have a discussion of what you can do. They will let you do all sorts of things. Civilian policemen get very excited when they're being encouraged to break the law, to do things that you're not doing. It's quite interesting that some of the things you come across. But again, challenge, look to try and do things to try and achieve what we want to try and achieve as a museum. Okay, in the late 1980s we had a major fundraising campaign for Hangar 1, and we secured a £25,000 grant from Newark District Council. We've always found the local council to be very supportive in what we try and do, and again we engage, we discuss things with them. As part of that grant allocation, they insisted that we had a longer lease, so they instigated us, encouraged us to go down and talk to the showground to get a better lease, which is what we did, and we completed the building in 6 months, cost of about £150,000. So only a very basic structure, but it got aircraft under cover and out of the elements. And that was, you know, a really major decision for us, but one of the correct decisions to follow. Build the first aircraft inside. You can't quite see it, but on this photograph here, one of the first to go inside was the Saab Sophia. And we had the unusual situation that the chairman of the district council was coming to officiate, and we got our tractor driver briefed and loaded up and expecting what he'd got to do. The chairman of the district council pushed him aside. He was a farmer, got on the tug with his grandson, and he towed the Sophia into the building. But, you know, hands-on and literally getting involved, and it just shows the engagement that you can create and generate. And, you know, we sort of take proud of working with people rather than against them. Okay, early 1990s, we were 1991 with Chiefs Phase 1 registration with the Museum and Galleries Commission. We were in the very early batches. I think our registration was 551. And that museum registration has continued through, and we remain an accredited museum. That activity, in terms of, we'll come on to the lottery application, was critical. It ticked so many boxes. In 1994, we then had a significant rent rise imposed on us by our landlords, and that basically started us along the lines of thinking to buy land. Because when somebody can come in and double your rent, you've not really got a negotiating position. And so we went through a process, and a little bit more on it, but we purchased 12.3 acres land next door. Tucked in there is the Saab Draken, but we'll come on to that in a later presentation. can't quite make it out, but the aerial view, apologies again for the poor light. You've got the museum site and then the acreage here, in effect where you've got the aeroboot taking place today is what we own. Very early we made sure we got access in, we got change of use, so we got the planning permission from change of use from agricultural land to an aviation museum, completed the access work directly off the road if we ever need to use it. If we have planning issues going forward, we can look at sorting those out, and you've got a more of a negotiating position. We then started investigating the lottery fund application, and as part of that, one of the operational names for the base name for Winthorpe during World War II was Clickheel. And so we launched Operation Clickheel to raise partnership funding for the Hangar 2 project. And then that time in 1999, much too late in the process, we actually instigated the RAF Winthorpe Memorial. But if you've been out in the Southfield site, you'll see that that's there. We had, some people said, well, why don't you put it on the main museum site? But we took a view then that this is leased, its future isn't 100% assured, so we build it on our own land, and then it's protected, and we struggle to take that off us. We'll fight very hard if anybody wanted to try and do that. We go through a process with that, and something that I'm quite proud of. Again, we did the memorial, you see it out there. Propeller boss recovered from the Stirling Lancaster with 1661, Stirling bomber that was lost over at Breedy Hills near the Vale of Beaver. The guy that did the official unveiling was a guy called Cliff Rogers, and Cliff Rogers was the Rolls-Royce test pilot, one of the Rolls-Royce test pilots over at Hucknall. But what we've also then found out, Cliff was also chief senior instructor with 1661 during World War II. So we've got that continuity of personnel and commemorating those aspects. And so the memorial has been developed significantly with other memorials to individuals, squadrons, units, bases, etc. And I say a big part of what we're about is remembering the past and in particular the people. We did the Hangar 2 lottery application in 2021, officially submitted. A big part of that process was using BAPC National Aviation Heritage Register. And we had some good listings in that initial document. And again, I've not done this publicly, but I would certainly like to thank Ken Ellis for his input in doing that, but also for John Barclay, who was chair at the time of BAPC. Their support and encouragement shone through with lotteries. We've got a document that you can reference and you can talk to, and suddenly they start to take you more seriously. Yes, you're registered, you're accredited, you've got this document, it does work. So Ken's not here, but thank you, John. Your support has been appreciated. We've discussed it in the past, but I've never done that publicly, so big thank you for that. When we went forward, Heritage Lottery were changing their application process, and we were strongly advised to delay our application. And that advice was on the basis that the funding was going to change from 75% funding to 90% funding. We can't tell you what to do, but it'd be really sensible to just delay it 6 months, because there's a potential that you might get some more money. And we did. We listened and we worked, and we went through that process, and we were actually awarded a grant of £453,000 for Hangar 2. Hangar 2 was done at a time we were looking at large building projects, architectural statement for want of a description, and basically, to coin a phrase from one of our local museum people, we were looking to put aeroplanes in a shed, and we advocated for that. And there's another gentleman sat in the room, Mr. Clark, former regular BAPC, working on various NICE committees. Mike joined us, and we had a hoot of a time, didn't we? Working to work with lotteries to develop schemes that worked for us. I think we trained a project monitor during the process, but we had dialogue. We worked with people to do that. I opened Hangar 2 this morning. That's a plus. It's great. We helped do this. Lots of people said we'd never do it, and we've done it. And so lots of people to call out and sort of thank you. Moved our first aircraft in, which was bizarrely the T-30, well, there's the JP and then the T-33, but the T-33 didn't stay in there very long. We got more interest in things like Sea Harriers or whatever. So, you know, we work, we develop, and again, talk to lotteries. We were going to change what aircraft we're putting in. The key for us at the time was designing the building to get the varsity in. There were no varsities undercover in any museum in the country at the time. We put the varsity in. Within 6 weeks, 2 other varsities went indoors. You know, it makes a difference, and that's part of what we try to do. Spring 2021, more up to date. Jaguar T2 came in from Everett, and then we had the Jaguar cockpit. I've just left them in. Hopefully, we're going to see some airplanes, but the way the presentations are going, it's not working today. I do apologise. Took a Domini. The Domini has long been on the wish list. Purchased from Everett in September 2014. From our point of view, it's a training aircraft. It's still got the original rear-facing training suite, so it's the original V-Force fit, which is the only one in any museum. I think there's Bill's. Is yours a rear-facing, Bill?
No,
Oh, come on, Bill. Putting people on the spot. I'm good at putting people on the spot, aren't I, Mr. Clark? So yeah, there are conscious decisions behind the acquisitions, really brought out by registration accreditation, and that's sort of guiding some of the development principles that we've got now. We did some major site developments in 2016-18, really uninteresting items. And that was primarily a waste treatment plant. We're not connected to main sewage, and we spent £115,000 on a treatment plant to make sure we're sufficient and we can provide the facilities visitors expect. We had the new cafe. You've probably not been into the new cafe. That was delivered at about £84,000 plus VAT on top. So you know, there are significant changes as we're trying to move forward and develop, and that's an ongoing process. 2018 was a helicopter year. The Puma, the Chinook, and then the Lynx. The Puma, Kev's hiding at the back there, one of our other trustees. Acquired from Agility, I think it was through the disposals programme, wasn't it? That was being used for training at Cranwell, and then as we were collecting the Puma, they made it known that they were also disposing of the Chinook. So we acquired the Chinook as well, and are slowly working through trying to acquire those parts for them. The Chinook, in some respects, is very special for us. A lot of the funding to help move it was one of our members, a guy called Brian Patton. And Brian's son Michael was an Irish Chinook loadmaster with 7 Squadron, and Michael was lost out of the side of a Chinook down in South Wales on exercise and was killed in 1996, I believe it was. And the family wanted something that they could come to and see, where his son, grandson, or whatever, had served, and they've helped fund the move for that aircraft. We use it extensively now with school visits. You take a school visit, you can take a class of 30 kids in and sit them down in the Chinook and explain things in all sorts of weathers. That one was lost in the Falklands about 32 years ago. Slowly we're working towards getting that back into proper factory. We're doing a lot of panel builds on that now because we're struggling to acquire parts. But again, keeping those connections and those memories to people, and making sure we do things in a structured way. August 2022, the Reed and Sigris Deptford came in. That was the last aircraft to be flown in. That was a gift under the accreditation banner in a sense. That was gifted to us by Leicestershire County Council. They had had the aircraft restored by a private company, and the brief was restored to flying standard, which it was done, and then the people who did the restoration started to fly it, which in terms of council post-shoreham wasn't the best of moves. So we were offered the airframe, local connections, just south of Nottinghamshire, and the development side, the work that was being done, and that was one of my lockdown projects. For my sins, the day before the Desford landed in August 2022, I headed to a 3 times cancelled holiday to the west coast of Canada, and so I missed the delivery. But WhatsApp is a wondrous thing, and I learned very quickly how to switch off notifications, because I'm sleeping in Banff and I start getting WhatsApp messages at 2 o'clock in the morning showing me the Desford's coming, and my good lady Helen said, "Can't you switch that flipping phone off?" It wasn't quite as polite as that, but again, you know, it's connections, and you know, proud to see it, and work. Last aircraft to come in, one of the oldest, 1946 it was built, but flown in with cooperation from the showground, taking fences down, moving it in late on a Friday afternoon. To anybody that was there doing that, well done, but don't send me WhatsApp messages in future, please. Okay, finally, bring me to an end, might be a bit early, might be not. Good news this week. We had a meeting with RF Museum here on Tuesday, and we had 3 items on long-term loan from RF Museum. We had the Yellow Sun, which was just a casing out in the Vulcan. We had the Alby 108 vertical lift engine, which is out of the VTOL development programme at Rolls-Royce at Hucknall, with the Nottinghamshire Airfield, and we got the Fireflash missile set, and those have all been transferred in ownership. They've been gifted to the museum by the RF Museum, so they're, if you like, our latest acquisitions. They came onto our books formally on Tuesday of this week. So it's always changing, there's always things happening, kind of what keeps us going. And if you could read it properly, it does say, any questions? That's me. That's me. Anybody any questions? Sorry. Anybody any questions? No, it gives you, it's a flavour. It's a lot. We're a people's organisation. We try and work with people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've had a situation today that wasn't the best, and I've had to try and deal with it. We do it. You've got to be reactive sometimes. Didn't work very well, but there we go. Thank you very much. You'll have a bit more of me later on. Thank you.